So one of my personal favorites from DZ-BT09, Super Brave Detonation, is the war criminal himself, Malwyrm Sybilt. Now Sybilt's power corrupts units, putting them into the mental pollution state, giving them brain rot and power plus 5k, so at the end of the turn they retire themselves. His signature order and supporting triple rare allows you to instead return them to hand when they're retired, resulting in the deck being a weird combination of great nature, similar to Success from G, as well as superior calling and playing normal orders like Keter Sanctuary, despite him being from Dragon Empire. So that's a rundown of what the deck does. Here's the timestamps if you want to skip ahead. I'm going to give a deck overview first with stats, review the cards, and then deck list explanations at the very end. So here are the deck overview stats for Sybilt. As you can see, there are ratings from 0 to 5, and I'll give definitions for each one in the description below as I'm talking. So first off, we have tempo aggro, and that's pretty straightforward for this deck. There's actually no control tools here, it's just very aggro go face, while keeping a hand and a board to just rush down your opponent. There's a lot of easy early game that carries the deck, mostly through Latifah, making you a board every turn, and Shenri as you aim to play an order every turn. You'll shove the soul, draw 1. So we have another aggro deck here, despite it being a Dragon Empire deck. There's actually no control or retire tools here besides the ace unit. You're aiming for 3 drives, 4 to 5 attacks, and thinning the deck through rear on places in order to flip trigger. So price here I put at 3 out of 5. This deck is mainly the Sybilt core from DZ-BT09 plus a few Dragon Empire generics depending on the list you choose, which do add to the price. Shenri has been reprinted, but it's still very pricey if you look at TCG player pricing. So while I wouldn't say it's that expensive, it's not exactly a cheap deck, so 3 out of 5. It'd be a little bit less compared to the price of Bavsagra right now, but Bavsagra is kind of the best deck in format right now. So for ease of use, I've actually put this deck only at 3 out of 5. I wouldn't say this deck is that hard to play, but it's not necessarily easy. You do have to think ahead for calling and returning units to hand for next turn, so therefore it's at 3 out of 5. You want to not clog up your board with rears that don't convert into draws, and you want to know what rears are going back to hand for next turn, while the rest go to drop after being retired. You also want to avoid bouncing a front row attacker unless you have to for next turn, as you can intercept with them. You'd rather bounce your back row cards that are just sitting there in order to maximize shield in your hand. So for competitiveness, I've given it a 3 out of 5. Personally, as biased as I am, I think this deck is severely underrated, but in terms of results, it's really only got a few tops on Fuzzy Paradox, so I've rated it at 3 out of 5 to be fair. It's a deck that is challenging with a very fun playstyle, but you could be putting that effort into another meta Dragon Empire deck like Bavsagra or Virgilia right now instead, and that payoff would be much higher. So for utility, I put the deck at 3 out of 5. As a Unison Dragon, Sybilt as a red deck again doesn't have any removal outside of the ace unit. There is Keter Flare Dragon and other Dragon Empire generics you could throw in, but they eat up counterblast to retire, and you could play the new set 9 monk generic to countercharge in order to mediate this, but it's still very iffy. The main utility comes from the ability to use generics to keep a board in hand while being aggressive, as well as the potential to bounce sentinels and use the all-powerful defensing roar at 1 copy in order to prolong the game. Alright, so now to cover the ride line really quickly. So first off, we have the grade 0 Sybilt starter with the usual, if you rode upon going second, draw 1. The starter name does matter for the grade 1 rode upon, so you can't actually swap it. When this unit is placed by riding from a card with Sybilt, you cost reveal a grade 3 card with Sybilt from your ride deck. Search your deck for up to 1 Sperod and Sybilt, who we once were, which is the order card. Reveal it, put it into your hand, and shuffle your deck. So before we get to the grade 2 rad line, I want to talk about the grade 2 order because you're going to play it on turn 2 anyways. You have the grade 2 order called Sperod and Sybilt, who we once were, that you can play if you have a Vanguard with Sperod or Sybilt's card name, so you can play it as early as turn 2. You put this card into Soul, choose one of your Vanguards, and it gains the red text ability until end of turn. Auto Vanguard Circle once per turn. When your unit without Sentinel is retired from Rearguard Circle other than during the main phase, you put that card into your hand. Then auto and drop, when your grade 3 greater unit with Sybilt in its card name stands by a card's ability, you cost, bind this card, discard a card from your hand, and your Vanguard's drive becomes 1 until end of turn. This is relevant later on for Sybilt, setting drive to 0, so then you'll set the drive back to 1, essentially doing 3 drives in a turn. So now back to the grade 2. On attack, you retire Rearguard and reveal a grade 3 Sybilt from your ride deck, draw a card, and gain plus 5k power until end of battle. The combo you'll mulligan for involves Latifah. You'll play the order first, give the red text to Vanguard, then play Latifah, soul blast out the order, set up the drop effect, check top 5, call a unit, then attack with the grade 2. You'll usually attack with Latifah first, then retire it on attack, bounce it back to your hand, draw 1 to reuse it on the next turn, and then of course still perform your drive check. So essentially getting you 3 cards. Shenri is usually what you'll call since it'll shove itself to soul draw 1 off Latifah and always be active since you aim to play orders every turn, and of course you get that guaranteed search from the ride line. So next up we have the star himself, Malwyrm Sybilt. So act on Vanguard Circle once per turn, you cost Soul Blast 1, choose up to the same number of rearguards as your opponent's grade, until end of turn they become brain rotted, entering the mental pollution state, gaining plus 5k power until end of turn, and the red text that auto at the end of your turn, retire this unit. The second skill is Auto Vanguard Circle. At the end of the battle that this unit attacked, you cost Counterblast 1, choose one of your rearguards in the mental pollution state or one of your vanguards, stand it, and until end of turn its drive becomes 0 and it gets plus 10k power. Then the last skill is auto Vanguard Circle once per turn. When a rearguard in the mental pollution state is retired during your end phase, draw 1. Sadly, the draw skill is once per turn, so you'll only draw once from this skill at the end, but the strength of Sybilt lies in being able to bounce attackers when they're retired and restand rear Vanguard columns. The Soul Blast 1 powering rears by 5k entering mental pollution state does matter for hitting over defensives going first, and also enables booster restands. You can also use it to Soul Blast out the order and drop if you didn't find Latifah or another card that can Soul Blast it out. Of course, Vanguard restand going first is strong, setting drive to 0, but the order drop effect sets it back to 1, even if your opponent is grade 2, resulting in you doing 3 drives every turn, and 4 to 5 attacks, 4 if you went first, 5 if you went second. The wording of the restand basically makes it so that unless your opponent is grade 3 or greater, you're only restanding a rear Vanguard and not both. But all the time you'll restand Vanguard for the extra single drive attack. So next up is Desolate Flare Dragon. It's the only triple rare Sybilt got, but it does have the continuous that if you have a Unison Dragon, aka Sybilt, and also Grianja as well that it supports, it gets the following abilities. Auto, when it's placed on Rearguard Circle, you cost Counterblast 1 to look at the top 7 cards of your deck, choose up to 1 Unison Dragon, aka your Persona Ride, or a normal order without Regulus piece, reveal it, add it to your hand, and if you did not reveal a card, draw 1, so it still does something if you whiff. Then Auto Rearguard Circle, when this unit attacks, it gets plus 5k power until end of battle. Then you have the option to cost Energy Blast 3, choose when you rearguards, then it gains the red text auto when this unit is retired from rearguard circle, put this unit into hand. The most notable text from Desolate Flare Dragon is that the red text here can bounce a sentinel, unlike the order's red text that basically does the same thing. So what's really neat is that you can use Latifah to check top 5, call sentinel, put it into the mental pollution state turn 3, then give it red text with Desolate Flare's on attack and bounce it back to hand at end of turn. This card, along with Latifah, makes finding your normal orders such as Who We Once Were and Drago Resonance very easy. Also, by putting it into the mental pollution state and returning it back to hand, you can reuse the on place to find more pieces and thin your deck. Just be careful using too much counterblast because you always want one counterblast for Sybilt's restand skill, and then any spare CB basically goes to Desolate Flare Dragon. So I kind of spoiled it earlier with the phrase restanding booster, but here is Drag Ritter Shock. In the back row once per turn, when your other unit in the same column stands, if this unit is in the mental pollution state, you stand it as well. As it specifies unit and not rear guard, this works as a restanding booster behind Sybilt when he stands, adding an extra 13k boost to Vanguard's 2 swings throughout the turn. Being able to recur the booster to use again on another turn is also really big if you give it any red text, and it's also really easy to slam behind Vanguard early in non-retire matchups, as you were going to call it regardless turn 3, and makes a 23k column turn 2 as Sephiroth gains plus 5k power. So the last Sybilt card to cover is Baki. It's a card you'll rarely see in lists over other Dragonite Bar generics as he uses Counterblast. He's basically a combine rusher for the deck that calls himself back from drop. The thing is, you just rather use other cards that have on-place effects to gain more advantage, and all your CB is already going to Sybilt or Desolate Flare. Alright, so now for some deck log explanation. So here's my list trying to do everything, having a good early and late game. Of course, Latifah and the Order are here at 4. They're cards you really need in every game. Latifah is the card you're going to mulligan for and hope for early, because if your opponent's grade 3 or greater, it can get plus 5k power for every open rearguard circle in the same column. So if your opponent retires their own rearguards, or you clear a column by retiring one with the ace unit, let's say, she'll get plus 10k power going second. The ace unit is in here over Falheart as an early turn 2 play to slam down and then draw 1 so you can tri-lane attack. The limited to 1 defensing roar is also here because it's a broken card and we have the space, bouncing OT, 20k fronts, or an attacker since you can intercept and play them with the blitz order is just too good. If you play Falheart, you can also bounce that as well. So since I'm playing Twin Cast as the Regulus piece here and there's a lot of blitz orders, I put the 4 normal Sentinel PGs instead of the 1 Sanctitude 3 normal PGs so you don't have conflicting blitzes. But you can of course add it back in. It's also because 4 normal Sentinels means more opportunities to call it off Latifah to perform the return to hand combo mentioned earlier in order to bounce a PG to hand. Shenri is here at 4 obviously because it's just more soul and draw, it's the best early game card. Only 3 of the restanding booster are here because you have more attackers than boosters, plus you can always bounce it back to hand for another turn off the Order or Desolate Flare's red text skill. So a card you'll see a lot is the Drag Ritter Quackazah, which has the Persona Shield cycler effect that when ditched for the ride deck or on place you can reveal a grade 3 with Persona Shield icon in your ride deck to get the Persona Shield ticket. Since you have so much soul to work with, it's easy discard fodder for the ride deck or a 15k solar beater, hitting decent numbers once you factor in Sybilt's plus 5k and any boost power. In case you don't know the Persona Shield effect, you can play it and then play a second blitz order such as Defensing Roar or Twin Cast. It also becomes a 15k instead of 10k shield if your opponent has a crest, Other than the energy generator, this is pretty much only relevant for stride deck sets and some collaboration decks. So here's a very quick generic list without any defensing roars or a rig list that plays 2 full heart along with 3 persona shield to have more ride phase cyclers, but I would recommend trying to fit both, or just either not playing full heart as well and just playing a more balanced defensive list in order to live, because this deck really has a hard time struggling to live and kind of crack back. So here's a really interesting list that I found on Vanguard Paradox that plays a more aggressive mid-late game, playing 4 Dragon Resonance for massive power, as well as the ditch fodder from DZ Set 3, Lorentz Glare Dragon, to call itself when discarded during your turn, except it can't attack if it's called during the battle phase. It gains the boost ability if you have more rear guards than your opponent, and this lets you call him mid-battle phase or during the ride phase to set him up as a booster when you pay for the order's cost to set Sybilt's drive to 1. It's also playing the Ace unit and the set 12 generic Galnet to either be a 20k shield or slam him down on rear in order to draw 1, removing 2 cards from the ride deck. So here's another nifty list that stands out. They got max rarity cards, so they really can't be wrong. They're playing the new Set 9 Modern Monk generic with the on-hit countercharge while also having the ability to search persona rides on hit. There's also 3 of Demonic Dragon Nymph Kata, which is a really interesting card that they're playing 3 of, that when you play a Blitz order it gains the ability to intercept and intercept from the back row for the turn, while also gaining plus 5k shield. It's an interesting tech to add more defense to the deck, especially if you call it off Latifah, but it's strange since they're only playing 1 Blitz, which is Defensing Roar, as the Regulus piece of choice here is Shroud and Shadow instead of Protection Twincast. It's a good option because Shroud and Shadow will activate Latifah's on-place effect while also calling a booster as well, and it's free on a turn you didn't ride from the ride deck, so basically turn 4. There's also Varga's Glaive Axe Dragon as a 1-of. He gets plus 10k in the front row if you don't have a card of the same name in the front row, and also won't get retired at end of turn, so he's a 28k beater once buffed by Sybilt, making magic numbers instantly. Drag Resonance is in here at 1 copy, and they're playing a mix of 1 effect 10k shield draw and 2 Solan effect fronts. They've also got a mix of effect crit and restand heals. So the mulligan for this deck is pretty straightforward. Always keep Latifah for that turn 2 combo because you can bounce it back and it's basically plussing you for 2 turns. Shemri is also an easy keep as it'll be easy to get off turn 1 if your opponent doesn't commit more than 1 rear, and you'll guarantee it once you play the order turn 2 to shove Soul Draw 1. For a secondary keep, I would recommend the Ace unit or Defensing Roar or your Regulus as they're your 1-ofs, ride deck dish fodder such as your Persona Shield Cycler, Fall Heart, or maybe your restanding booster if you want to be really aggressive. Desolate Flare Dragon is also fine for turn 3 shenanigans, but you can always find him later, and your restanding booster for early game and late game scaling is really strong. So your late game closer cards to push would be Persona Ride and Drag Resonance. Desolate Flare Dragon can find both of those from the check top 7 later, so that's why I put it in the later issue column. You don't really need it in your early mulligan. It's not a big priority unless you feel like you're in a matchup that is very grindy. So kind of to briefly go over the attack pattern, here's the turn 2 play in action. You'll play the order, call Latifah, check top 5, call a unit, swing one side, usually it's Latifah first if you want to bounce it, then on attack, sack it off for the retire, return it back to hand and give triggers to the other rearguard or the Vanguard column. Then turn 3, you play order, use Latifah again, fill up board you best you can, put rears into the mental pollution state, buffing them by plus 5k. If you went first or play Dragon Resonance, you'll likely swing Vanguard first to play for fronts, or you swing rear on one side and then Vanguard if your opponent is Great Through Greater, as you'll restand both a rear and Vanguard doing 5 attacks with Sybilt's skill. If you went first, then you're doing 4 swings, restanding Vanguard, setting its drive to 1. Just keep in mind how big your side columns are and if they'll scale over defensive trigger pretty much. So that is it from me for the Sybilt deck guide. There isn't actually too much in depth in this video, but do feel free to ask questions and experiment with the deck. Use any of these lists as you want as your starting deck point. Of course, they will all be in the description, and do let me know if this video was helpful. Thank you so much for watching. Sorry that this was really late, but do make sure to like and subscribe if you want to see more Vanguard videos or more deck overview guides like this.